Over the past months, I've been thoroughly engrossed in two things. One being to finish the lore video about Elden Ring's Ancient Dragons. I highly recommend you to check out, and playing Dragon's Dogma 2. I did everything in the game. Every side quest, slew every monster, discovered every cranny of the map, and even almost every seeker token. I was and still am hooked to it. This game gave me the exact same magical feeling when I played Elden Ring for the first time when it launched. And although I cannot describe this feeling, you know exactly what I mean, because we all had this feeling with Elden Ring. Which got me thinking why it is. Why did I get this very special feeling with Dragon's Dogma 2 and Elden Ring, but not with other games? It is a great game. End of story. That, however, is too easy of an answer. Although it is true and it plays a part in this, there's also another reason for my unique experience with the game. Because the game respects the player's intelligence. What I liked, which is very unique for Dragon's Dogma 2 and extremely rare among other games nowadays, is how it pointed me in a direction, but still left me the freedom to explore and do whatever I want on my own. It didn't bombard my map with brilliant markers or threw a pop-up into my face that I had to progress the story before going to Portal, for example. Not that it gave me only stale places to explore and discover, but instead unique, memorable, and extremely creative content. Right away, if I could see an intriguing landmark in the distance or stumble upon a cave, I could just dive in there without worrying whether my level matched the area or whether I was supposed to be in there with my current game progress. Dragon's Dogma 2 offered me total freedom in how and when I wanted to tackle its plentiful content. Exploration is definitely the best part of this game and also its core message, in a sense. This game is all about a journey you embark on from the moment you arrived in Vermont, and where the game really opens up its many different paths, presenting every player with the choice of what they want to do and giving us the freedom to explore the world at our own pace. And choices are very important in this game. Whether it's how much gear you carry, you take on a quest and do it now or later, or how much you prepare your party before heading out. Every decision impacts the player's experience and in turn affects how they experience the main story or endings to side quests. The story itself isn't groundbreaking at all. It's pretty straightforward and very easy to follow. But its simplicity also has its moments of depth if you really want to get into the world's lore, particularly about the Endless Cycle and the Dragon's Dogma, especially when examining these under a philosophical lens. However, the story never was the strongest point of these games. The real deal here is the gameplay. It's always been the core of why I and everyone enjoys these games. Dragon's Dogma 2 absolutely nails its gameplay and improved it on every fundamental level.
You're fortunate indeed. This is a rare find.
We shall have to think long and hard about what to do with it.
Methinks we could move this boulder if we work together.
Shall we set it rolling?
What? How? Not only is the combat super fun and engaging, but it isn't always straightforward. Because something like this, or this,
Just not what I expected.
It was at this moment he knew. He fucked up.
can always happen. Which, yes, is absolute bullshit, but also a fun and memorable experience. The essence of Dragon's Dogma nails its ability to offer a unique journey for every player in its gameplay. Because thanks to the complex interplay of its many game mechanics, no two players will have the exact same experience. My own journey was both unique and fascinating, so much so that I wish I could experience it all over again by deleting my memories. I had so much fun with my first playthrough. This game and my experience with it is going to stick with me for a long time. It's memorable in every way and reminds me of what makes a great game. Fun. Something that many Western developers seem to have lost sight of. Because I cannot think of many Western AAA games in the last few years I had as much fun with as with Dragon's Dogma 2 or Elden Ring. Which is why I see a clear trend forming in the gaming landscape right now. A stark divide between Japanese and Western game developers that is about gaming philosophy. Japanese developers often prioritize customer satisfaction above all else, treating the customer like God and striving to deliver an enjoyable experience no matter what. This approach is evident in how they cater primarily to their main audience, veteran hardcore gamers. With Japanese-based companies, be it Capcom, Nintendo, Square Enix, From Software and others I cannot think of, having more W's than losses over the last decade. On the flip side, many Western developers, including big names like Ubisoft, Activision Blizzard, and EA, seem to have different agendas. An agenda that doesn't allow free creativity for the developers or fun for the players of the games. Their games often feel like guided to-do lists that are littered with absurd overpriced items such as battle passes, cosmetics, dumb DLCs or loot boxes, with us having to spend almost several $100 just to get a complete gaming experience. Take Ubisoft's Star Wars Outlaws as the latest example. The game not only comes with a hefty price tag of $130 for its biggest tier, but also forces players to be always online, locks content behind paywalls, and has garnered a lot of negative feedback from the gaming community for these practices before it even released. And if Ubisoft wants me to be comfortable with not owning my games, then I will gladly do so by not buying and owning any Ubisoft games anymore. Although I was initially interested in this game, I'm not gonna buy this game until it gets a hefty discount, is available on Steam, and a modder decides to remove the always online function. Then this game won't feel like a fucking ripoff. This criticism of certain Western game studios getting shittier over the years is a widespread consensus in online discussions, where many gamers express clear disappointment with the quality of games from these giant gaming companies. And when they are being compared to their Japanese counterparts, they really aren't great. For more details on the failure of Western game companies, just go and watch Asmongold's content on any game Blizzard is currently working on. Spoiler, it's a shit show. And I'm not talking about Asmon's decent looking room. The overall general sentiment is that Western devs are too focused on appeasing every potential demographic. They are diluting the gaming experience as a result to ensure it's accessible to anyone, even those who aren't familiar with gaming. This strategy leads to oversimplified games that neglect the core gaming audience, veteran gamers, because such games become too easy and shallow. This trend is contributing to a new divide in the gaming community between Western and Japanese developers, as well as between newbie gamers and hardcore, sweaty, seasoned veterans. It is in fact reminiscent of the situation years ago with From Software's Demon's Souls, which was designed for a niche audience. They recognized that almost no games at that time catered towards gamers who have played games for plus 10 years and knew how they operate. As such, they took a risk of going against popular game trends during that time, released some of the greatest games to this day, and they have seen massive success with their games. Today, that niche, however, has grown significantly as gaming has become more mainstream over the past 2 decades. Yet, this growing audience isn't so niche and is not made up of veteran gamers at all. That niche consists of gamers who might only be familiar with franchises like Assassin's Creed, Fortnite, Genshin, COD or FIFA, which don't require skill to play them, and are probably some of the only games they have ever played. As gaming continues to evolve and grow, this divide will deepen further, often leaving hardcore veteran gamers dissatisfied with the quality, standards, and execution of many modern AAA titles from Western game studios. For the truth is that there are more casual normie gamers than veteran gamers who aren't longing for games that challenge their skills and require dedication to get good in to have fun. But what causes this shift in overall game quality degradation in these Western game studios? Instead of channeling their efforts into creativity, which is crucial for crafting compelling games, they are getting bogged down by factors that ultimately don't contribute to the quality of the games they produce. These distractions come in many forms, be it pleasing investors, having too complex company hierarchies, an overabundance of bureaucracy, developers not being gamers at all, or taking less risks and stick to old and sometimes stale formulas they can count on to make them money for sure. But one of the latest and probably the worst influencing factors for creative processes is something known as environmental social governance, ESG in short. So, what exactly is ESG? ESG encompasses criteria that define certain standards for a company's operations. This is quite an important metric to socially conscious investors who use such scores to screen potential companies for investments. Environmental criteria consider how a company performs as a steward of nature. This includes how they manage their impact on the environment, such as their carbon footprint, waste management, and resource conservation. Bottom line, how bad their business is for the environment. Social criteria examine how a company manages relationships with employees, suppliers, customers, and the communities where it operates. This includes labor practices, diversity and inclusion, as well as its involvement in the community. As such, if you're a dick towards everyone, then your score will be 0, but you might also make a shit ton of money, whilst role model behavior will earn you a good noodle star. Lastly, governance involves a company's leadership, executive pay, audits, internal controls, and shareholder rights. In short, how good they are for the company's continued success. Investors who focus on ESG criteria believe that these standards are a good indicator for a company's future performance, as they reflect its ability to mitigate risk related to environmental and social issues, as well as to maintain responsible governance. This approach is often thought to lead to more sustainable, long-term company growth and is becoming increasingly popular among investors around the world. And if you think about it for a second, you can see why the quality of games, particularly in its creative aspects, gets worse at these companies. ESG is a rating system which is about making a company appealing to investors rather than enhancing the gaming experience and making a great product for a customer. These ratings assess how well a company performs in non-directly product-related social and environmental areas. This in turn means that a company can make easy money so long as their ESG score is high. So instead of creating the best possible product for consumers, they will find investors that are willing to invest up to 6 figures or more into a gaming company. So long as they produce games, people are willing to play. And because of that, if a creative director at one of these companies has an amazingly risky idea for a cool and unique game, they can be easily shut down with the argument that their idea has to be altered to the end of building up their company's ESG score. Because a high ESG score can mean for the company the profits of a successful AAA game through just one person with enough money to invest. And if this game is also commercially extremely successful, then they will in turn make up to double the money they expected through both investors and consumers. As such, the declining quality of video games from these companies is in part driven by one of the oldest reasons known to man: their greed for more, easy, and almost guaranteed money. However, this doesn't mean that ESG is the only contributor to bad games. Because on paper, the concept behind ESG scores is actually a good thing for both a company and the consumer. If a company achieves high scores in all three categories, then this means that a company is operating at a very efficient and effective level. This in turn means that they are unlikely to be plagued by internal issues, have happy employees, and aren't wrapped up in lawsuits with governments over breaching regulations. They then can focus all of their efforts into creating the best products for the consumers, which is actively reflected in the environmental and governance criteria of ESG. The best example for pro-environmental moves is the Right to Repair initiative for the consumer, which is especially important with electronics of any kind, as with the access to spare parts for broken electronics, you yourself or someone can fix for you your broken smartphone, for example. Meaning that you don't have to spend almost 2K for the newest latest model every 1 to 2 years. Which you most definitely not even need. And in turn, governance keeps the C-suite of a company in check to some extent. Because if they act like shit and don't look out for the company and employees, then not a single investor would give them a dime, since they would see a company that could go under any month. As you can see, ESG ratings aren't inherently bad for the consumer. In fact, we as consumers should benefit from them. However, the current issue is how it is implemented in the economy, and especially by these Western gaming companies. From what we can observe, they do not practice what they should preach with the ESG scores. They put up a facade to convince investors that they are a safe bet to invest in, while in actuality some engage in very anti-consumer practices or treating employees horrible. The worst case of such a horrendous company culture was Blizzard and Activision before the acquisition through Microsoft. We learned through numerous strikes, whistleblowers, and reports about the horrendous work environment its former CEO Bobby Kotick fostered, which in turn contributed to the massive decline in game quality of every IP they have worked on.
To understand how rough the working conditions were at Blizzard, we worked overtime a ton. The pay was not very good. It was a bad time. So I went to Amazon Game Studio, which is about 4 minutes away from Blizzard in Irvine. And in my first month, I went to my boss and I said, hey, I don't feel like I'm doing very good work. I feel like I'm not achieving anything. It's starting to weigh on me because I don't feel like I'm getting very much done. And he said, take the rest of the day off. This was a Thursday. He said, take the rest of the day off, take tomorrow off, take a 4-day weekend. I'm not taking it out of your PTO. I understand what you're feeling right now, because he was from Blizzard, and he said, we were overworked there. This is a normal job. This is the normal amount of hours you work every day. And what you're feeling right now is the fact that you don't know how to deal with that. You were overworked for so long that moving at a normal pace feels like you're standing still. And I was like, Jesus Christ. And I took the 4 days and I came back and he was totally right. It was one of the best bosses I ever had, man.
As such, the core issue here is that much of the dialogue around topics like social justice, gender correctness, and similar themes fundamentally don't impact the essence of most video games. Because gamers don't give a shit about any of this. They just want a good game. And if a company wants to engage in such practices, with the goal to acquire more money to make even better games, then no one would care if the current games were good. Plus, we wouldn't see instances such as a Steam page tracking the activities of Sweet Baby Inc. A company facilitating a problem that doesn't really exist so that they can sell themselves as the solution for this hypothetical issue. As such, instead of overly focusing on ESG scores and investor money, Western gaming companies should instead let its creative workforce do the fundamental work of creating a great game, tell its accountants and micromanaging managers to sit still and let the creators create a great product. Hell, or maybe even copy a Japanese game studio to the T and don't adopt the toxic work culture. This would also be a good bet to make good games. Because when companies give their game devs the necessary freedom, not only will the overall game quality be great, but diversity and all that kind of shit will naturally come in the game itself, which won't feel forced like it is the case now. And in turn, the money will flow. So, instead of worrying that companies like EA, Ubisoft or whoever else will ruin gaming for all of us, just let things go their way. Because there will come a point in which either Western game studios realize that they need to course correct in order to stay in business or go under and don't bother us with shitty games anymore. And if they don't realize the issue, then I wouldn't see it as a huge loss for us gamers. For there are still those private game studios, without the pressure from investors like in public companies, that produce some of the best games, among which being Larian Studio, in general indie games, AA studios, and the entire Japanese dev space. So yeah, if those big public Western game studios want to overly focus on ESG scores and investor money, then let them. Don't buy their shitty games and let them be replaced by better companies as they fade into obscurity. Something similar happened back in the early 80s between Atari and Activision. Activision was founded by former Atari programmers and became the first third-party video game developer due to them not being paid well and heavily restricted in their creativity by Atari. They started producing games for the Atari 2600 console without Atari's consent. Atari sued Activision in 1982, alleging copyright infringement and breach of contract, as these programmers had left Atari and taken their expertise with them to compete against the business. The lawsuit eventually settled, with Activision agreeing to pay royalties to Atari, but the case marked a significant moment in video game history because this set the precedent for the future of third-party game development. So today, Activision has assumed the role of Atari back then, and having been bought up by Microsoft now, we can see the same history play out today, but with different entities and different circumstances. Every startup company starts off with good intentions, but over time becomes bad due to its focus shifting more and more solely to profits only. Especially if a company becomes public with many shareholders. And as a final thought, I want to draw a parallel between this trend and Dragon's Dogma's law. Life is from beginning to end a cycle. Everything small and good can and will turn big and evil before it is replaced by the next small good. Hence, the real significance lies not in who we are, the labels we carry, or from which company we buy our games. What matters is the journey we experience in this adventure we call life. The journey, the experiences we choose, the passions we pursue, and the people we decide to spend time with is what truly matters. Focusing on divisive or superficial discourse can detract from what makes life genuinely fulfilling. Just engage deeply with the things you love. After all, in the grand scheme of things, everything else are just distractions sucking away at our preciously limited lifetime and game time. And buying games from studios that don't respect you as a gamer aren't worth your time, let alone your money. As such, what matters the most is to have an experience resonating with anyone unanimously instead of catering to the whims of a select few that ultimately do not matter, as they, like any of us, will die eventually, but with likely more regret, hatred and sadness towards their own lives than you and me who know what is important and what matters most. How the fuck do we stop inflation?